The period that came next for this for me was the most painful ever in my entire life. I realized I had suffered really, really bad PTSD. My entire existence felt like suffering. Whenever you sleep, the memories come back in a flood. You purposely keep your eyes open as long as you can so you don't see the monsters the night brings. I had nightmares every single night for years straight, with stuff like demons eating out my own intestines, goblins ripping me apart, or being chased by monsters. Sleep, or its absence, is the worst part of PTSD. The hours of shaking in the shower before you can sleep. The permanent suffering at all times is the worst. There were about a dozen times I literally did lose physical control of my body due to hitting a bad trigger. I faced thousands of little horrors in my life that would ruin someone else. I felt the most pain when I felt good. Due to the way PTSD works, is your fight or flight mechanism's always on. And so when that mechanism starts to relax and you start to feel good, it kicks up again. I was stuck in a permanent loop of hyperarousal, which ironically stops you from actually being aroused. You just need to know that physiologically hell exists, and I've already lived there against my own consent. The time period for 3 years after I did ayahuasca were so horrible, especially the first year. The second year was pretty bad too. You'll get there. The fall afterwards was so difficult, and I'm so thankful I made it through. And through all the horror, I forced myself every day to say, Rudyard, when you get out, you will thank God that you survived this time period. I felt as if I had lost my sense of self for years. I fought back as hard as I could against PTSD. I started working only a month after I did ayahuasca. I was still reading 70,000 pages a year and working with my business contacts, none of which knew I had PTSD. I remember hundreds of days I could barely hold my eyes open while I worked. Hundreds of days I forced myself to work, although I hadn't slept the night before. I didn't trust my family, so I needed to make my own money to support myself. I forced myself to work because I needed something to not go crazy. My life was too subjective. I needed something objective to not go mad. I would go crazy without work. And I was making bank at the time. I was making like $300K. It was awesome. I had a pretty good lifestyle back then. And my suffering was so enormous, I immediately tried to find methods to allay it. And I had a previous therapist who was a leftist who tried to drop me when she realized I was a conservative almost immediately. And I found an amazing EMDR therapist. And EMDR is something I cannot speak more highly of. And the way EMDR works is that they move a wand in front of your eyes, which hacks into how your brain processes information. I frankly think EMDR and ayahuasca are both breakthroughs in the field of human psychology. EMDR is very effective because after a 2-hour session, you rewire how you process information. For example, if you were molested, you could say, I feel like a slut. You logically know that's not true, but you emotionally do. So you ask yourself rationalistic questions about why you believe yourself to be a slut. And then by the end, you force your subconscious through moving the wand to realize that it's not actually your fault. Because the nature of PTSD is that PTSD occurs when something outside of your frame of understanding occurs, which forces your mind to constantly assess for things outside of its understanding. And I had a really great therapist who did a wonderful job of cleaning me out. I'd like to thank him for basically saving my life, and that EMDR saved my life, and it's why I'm here. And and EMDR taught me that how we perceive reality is dictated by unconscious narratives we don't even think about. The journey with EMDR forced me to come to terms with that our entire civilization has these negative psychological beliefs that are just killing us. I still feel PTSD today somewhat 3 years after this started. I make this process sound way easier than it was. At the time, I was living in this 5-bedroom penthouse in Midtown Manhattan with a bunch of Indian tech bros from Dallas. They were fun guys. And it was a great deal. I got a relatively cheap side note. When I was in New York, one of my buddies took me to one of the most prestigious nightclubs there. I paid $500 to enter. And God, I envy the lifestyle I had back then. That was so much fun. Then once I got in, we got a table. I got blackout drunk. The club uses a ladder to put up a disco ball at 2 a.m. I climbed up the ladder before they could to mog the disco ball. And then they pushed me back into the club, and I would make fun of people for being there as if they were silly and stuck up. And I would say, "Who are you? Why are you here? And what is your story?" Because I was drunk and I was bored. The girls were sevens at best. The girls are not attractive enough. It's not a good place for game. You can't talk. The music's not good. The everything's overpriced. You should just never go to nightclubs. That is a true lesson that I have sacrificed for you. I have been to the club like 50 times and never enjoyed it, so that I could attain enlightenment. So now you no longer have to go to the club. Man, the summer of 21 in New York City was so much fun. I had multiple friends who would throw $7,000 parties where and I was part of a rightist organization that was trying to form an American colony in the Balkans. I've integrated the failings they've done into my current leadership structure, though. The air grew evil in a palpable sense. The city's culture was rotting and going mad before my own eyes. I could sense something really, really bad was about to happen. It's the air got tense. I guess whenever something bad's about to happen, I can feel there's tar in the air psychically, where I have a sort of sense to pick up when places are going to go to hell. It's how I got out of Peru at the right time, why I went to China the last year before they closed their border to Westerners. But I got out of Los Angeles and New York what felt like the right time, because in the time since, wokeness has destroyed New York to a level that people won't believe until we realize the full effect of it years later. Mass immigration and crime issues have destroyed the city. I have friends who lived in New York for decades, and they're never going to go back. And you drive across those states, people are fat, mentally ill, depressed, they're religious fundamentalists, but their religion is the state. And the whole Northeast has fallen apart. Whenever I go to the Northeast, I'm just horrified to see what happened, because this is my home. And my home was destroyed by basically a demonic plague that occurred within living memory. And I live in Texas now to escape it. And it's just so sad. And I wish we could grieve it more. And I tried to ignore my suffering through work, reading, and traveling. Matt D and I traveled around the world together. After a year of excruciating pain, I faced even more pain that summer. Yay! I called it Heartbreak Summer. I had told my father that if he wasn't careful at managing his schedule with his girlfriend that I would have a PTSD attack. He refused to tell me the schedule, and so there was a point when I lost physical control of my body at his house, breaking into screams and muscle spasms. Jennifer said I was doing this for attention. I told him he wasn't my father anymore and that I would never speak to him again. We had a conversation with my therapist 2 weeks later, who patched things up. I had also broke things off with a girl who was disrespecting me, so I was looking for something interesting to do to not think about the heartbreak. For people who would like to give me responsibility at this point, the PTSD is no longer an issue. Where, let's say, if you're a black person and you have PTSD against white people due to slavery, I don't know, the left says stuff, you should talk to nice white people. And that is what will end your PTSD against white people. And the next day, Matt called me up, and he said he was forming a social club for Instagram influencers in Los Angeles, and he wanted my help. Deeply, too. I try to do all my shopping in the third world. Egypt and Italy was like, but it was completely spiritually and psychologically dead. But they got a lot of nice food for... I totaled my car in Ohio after... I initially hated Los Angeles. I saw it as an ugly place with terrible architecture filled with mean people. I just remember feeling complete emptiness and sorrow because I did not actually enjoy being a degenerate. I went on dates with like a dozen different girls in that few-month period, including a few Instagram models. I have what shouldn't be high standards, but often turn into them, where I immediately cut out a woman who lies to me, who insults my honor, who is older than 26, who is a whore, who annoys me. Because my rule is if I would rather stay at home and listen to Korpiklani than go on a date with you, then we will not have a date, and I will stay at home and listen to Korpiklani. And I basically filtered out all the women because none of the Los Angeles women could pass that pretty easy test. Yeah, it's just an immoral, godless society. Beautiful people are often actually quite boring. After hanging out with a lot of beautiful people, I started thinking, okay, what next? I've attained this. What is the next stage of my life? I'm getting bored. Because if you want to really be cool, you should follow the fashion of Louis XIV and the 18th century French aristocracy. They have objectively better taste than you. You could look at Pericles in Greece. You could look at the Taoist art of China, and yet you wear a hoodie, and yet you vape. From the old social network Plus that I told you about, I knew a lot of people in the creator system, in the Hollywood system, and that whole world. I hung out in a lot of creator circles and with managers. Apparently, I had a brief opportunity to live with Usher that didn't work out, and I told that to my dad, and he said, "Why are you hanging with has-beens?" I went to 2 churches for content creators. There's one in the Hollywood Hills, like 50 content creators, and they would say thank you, Jesus, 1,000 times, and they'd start jumping up and down, having PTSD convulsions with the word of God. Man, Los Angeles is a vortex of just like crazy energy. I have nothing else to say. It's pretty special. The way I think about, or I talk about, or study the way the world works is that I have multiple mental models in my mind for different predictive scenarios, and I run these at once. In this method, I try to see inside someone's mind and then calculate the decisions they're making as I interact with them to see which predictive model predicts how they talk. This is one of the most useful things I do, and I love doing it, and it's one of the most useful skills you can get as a person. And I want to make an academic field about this in the future called mentalization, or the study of how people perceive consciousness and make decisions based upon their context, whether cultural, sexual, class, personality, historic, whatever. It's thinking about thinking. And what I found is that the motivations that made sense for Los Angeles were pure nihilism, greed, and self-loathing. Los Angeles was the thing that got me to believe in the Civil War and Mouse Utopia. That was since in the process of my club lifestyle, I had interviewed dozens of Zoomers in addition to my YouTube. In effect, I had a sample size of both lots of successful young people, or the highest social class among Zoomers, as well as right-wing young men, and what people in my hometown or Philly thought, alongside people I've wandered across around the country. This made me realize from a bunch of different points how Zoomers process the world, and it completely changed how I related to my environment and how I perceived the world around me. And I knew lots of super handsome male models, successful, charming, single CEOs, content creators. I knew a lot of like great dudes, just holistically, very charming. And again, 90% of them are single. Keep in mind, I've been in a lot of networks, and this is the shared variable among each of the networks, like the dozen networks I've been a part of. The dating crisis is apocalyptic. And this is in addition to mass poverty and loss of social mobility. It made me realize a civil war was imminent because we can't keep going like this. If this was the best of demographic, what's going to happen to everyone else? Because I have lots of friends from working class backgrounds, and everyone they know is just completely screwed. Because even for upper middle class college educated people, the people I know who go to Harvard, they're still fucked up. Something very, very bad has just happened, and we're trying to ignore it. Los Angeles is also the thing that got me to believe in Mouse Utopia. Coming from Pennsylvania, I assumed all people in the world were basically religious, moralistic, motivated by supporting their families and by supporting their nation. I just assumed that all humans were like this at their core. And then in Los Angeles, I saw a complete different kind of human society, not really paralleled in human history that much. A few rare places with decadence. Because what I saw in Pennsylvania is what the historic record looked like, and I saw something here that is not paralleled in the historic record. This is worse, and this is Mouse Utopia. Because I believe in Mouse Utopia. For those who do not know, you should watch my video, because it is the only predictive model that explains literally everything. What I saw in Los Angeles is Mouse Utopia in action. Back to the topic. I see now that God had guided me to Los Angeles, given he needed to show me what would happen if I didn't start helping my people. Los Angeles was my desperate attempt to avoid the destiny that God had given me on ayahuasca. I was racked by the most horrifying PTSD, and I lacked the ability to realize my best self. I hated my own desire for excellence. I acted like a degenerate with other degenerates because I was purposely trying to avoid my destiny by doing the thing that was the most basal. Because I grew up in a Christian environment, and Christians would talk about degeneracy and chaos, and I was always torn between my parents' identity, which was more conservative, and the society's cultural values. Because my parents are more old school, same with where I grew up. So I was always trying to figure out these two things. And Los Angeles was a huge moment because I was investigating the lie I wanted to believe, which was that the old America was real. It forced me to realize that the values I was given by my people and by my family, they were the real thing. This modernity was just a lie forced on us against our own consent that we acclimated to. And when I could come to terms with this, I'd realized that the innate heroism and desire for God were the things that had actually protected me over the course of my life. The social club didn't work out, partly due to a leadership squabble, but also because we had a 90% flake rate in Los Angeles that's consistent there, where we would invite like 70 people to a party, and then like 10 or 7 would show up. Or you might say there's a degree of resentment I have here, and that's completely accurate. One of the girls I was working with was pretty attractive, and she had a lot of followers on social media. And she started flirting with me unprompted and said she loved me. We hung out in each other's place a few times, and then I realized she was going on dates with 5 other guys and chose a multimillionaire over me. So I have no faith in upper-class women at all. 90% of the time they flirt with you, they're really either doing some kind of social game or they're trying to get attention farming off you. My friend Dave Hamilton, who runs the think tank that puts on conferences for the military and politicians, invited me to a conference he ran for the Air Force in Austin, Texas. I fell in love with Texas immediately and moved to Austin a month later. I'm not going to flatter Texas too hard, though, because I know that if the Texans are rich for too long this century, that their insufferable arrogance will kill them in the same way as California was killed by the state's narcissism and solipsism and delusion, where California was a perfect place a century ago or even into the 1970s, and then it died. And Texas is a wonderful state now, just don't mess it up. This period was also instrumental in that I met most of the people who would later become the leadership for the conservative faction I founded later, or the people who became my new best friends, who are capable, intelligent, moral, and driven. I could never have asked for better men. I shed all of my previous friend groups, whether Los Angeles, plus Tech, Pennsylvania, college, among others, and the only close friend I kept was Merrick. And Merrick and I became incredibly close as he was instrumental to every part of my life, and he is one of the few friends I kept from earlier. Thank you again, Merrick. And he started working more integrally in my business. But I canceled the trip since I was doing some stuff for the Air Force, and I was worried I would get us all killed with that affiliation. I had a major turning point at this part of my life where I no longer wanted to die in battle, which was my fantasy ever since high school, since I realized that I was too important to too many people that it would be irresponsible for me to die. And we made the decision to not contact MI6. That was quite satisfying. The next part of the story is something I had never anticipated. I keep on saying different parts of my life are the most painful, since my whole life has been so incredibly painful. This is definitely in competition for being the top competitor, both living through it and having to psychologically process it as an adult. There was this moment when I was in Texas where I thought to myself, if I was raped as a child, how would my life be different? I wondered, since I had previously had PTSD upswellings of memories, that I had been raped as a child that I had repressed and thought I was just being silly and making stuff up. One of the difficult parts of my life is I'm innately paranoid, and then reality throws me paranoia and weird things. Like, I didn't expect to see the collapse of civilization in the last 5 years. I didn't expect things to get this bad. So childhood makes me paranoid. Adult life makes me paranoid. And I thought that I would have memories of getting raped. I thought I was just being silly because the memories with PTSD, it's just an emotion. You have to heal more to translate the emotion into an actual memory because your mind needs to heal. And by that point, I had spent a year and a half in trauma therapy, and the memories came out like a flood. The night where I remembered it all was one of the hardest nights in my lives. And I spent the next year recovering memories I had repressed in my childhood. This is what my my unconscious gave my conscious when I finally felt safe enough. When I was in Texas and when I had done a lot of EMDR healing and I'd stabilized. And what I'm about to tell you is so horrible, and I would tell you to not watch if you couldn't handle it, but I had to live through this bullshit when I was a child. So if I lived through it, you can watch this and you'll be fine. You're not going to get hurt. It's just words for you. For me, it's my life. I had learned that I had massively underplayed the horror of the trauma I had lived through from my mom and the system when I was a child, or more accurately, ages 6 to 10. My mother had raped me over 40 times in that age range. The details make things even vastly worse. My mother waterboarded me at least 2 or 3 times, or drowning me in the bath. My mom had forced me to rape my own sister, and she had forced the babysitter to rape me. My mom had burned me with scalding water to punish me, hit me in the back with a shovel as a kid. A few memories have really stuck with me, and they required years of EMDRs to clean out. One was my mom beating me over the head with a 1,000-page book. That was her standard move, and she did it hundreds of times. The sound's been locked in my ears as a crack like gunpowder. I just hear... It's so loud, and it was stuck in my ears. When I was stressed, my ears would block up with sounds. So when I'd have panic attacks, I'd hear the sound crackling in my ears. I developed this thing called the Ring of Fire when I was a kid, or a ring of bruises around my shoulders. My mom said my dad was beating me, and so the courts were looking for any evidence of that. And so in class where I'd take off my shirt, even for classes where the teacher is demanding that I do it, I would keep my shirt on forcibly, even if the teachers punished me, because I wanted to save my dad, because I loved him, and I knew that if the teacher saw my bruises, that they would blame it on him, and I would never see him again. My mom would claim to own me and my soul and gave me no privacy. She would walk in on me in the shower and bathroom and scream at me, or give me an unprompted reminder that she was in charge. She hated me just for being a man, and she said she owned my penis. She would tell me that she could see into my mind, and she punished bad thoughts. My mom unironically practiced black magic. She was doing satanic rituals when I was a kid. I know this. I've seen it. I have photographic memory. I remember. This is all real. She believed that she practiced magic, and she did. I don't know how effective it is, but it objectively happened. As said before, my mom would drown me in a bath a few times, and that was one of her favorite methods to torture me. She used it to try to get me to break me. Her whole goal was to break me. And there were a couple times where I did something she didn't like, and then she just drowned me. My mom would also hold me down and smash my head against the bathroom floor repeatedly. This was really difficult for me to move past, and I still have nightmares about it now. There was an experience that bordered on spiritual, where my mom was smashing my head against the bathroom floor, and I passed out from the suffering. I basically psychically orgasmed from how bad the pain was, feeling ecstasy in the suffering. I found that this was one of the most difficult things to heal from with PTSD, where PTSD is often like an addiction. And so I was addicted to just the extremity of suffering as the adrenaline kicks in, because at least I felt something. In my entire life, I felt numb from the PTSD. The last girl I was with, she was sleeping over, and then she just touched my shoulder. My shoulder just started shaking uncontrollably, and I had to leave the room. And yeah, it's not good. And whenever I'd scream, she would say, no one's ever going to hear you because we lived in the countryside. Our nearest neighbors were miles away. So I'd scream at the top of my lungs and no one could hear it. Thank God that's over, man. Thank you. My mom was obsessed with the CIA and had read dozens of books about them. She unironically used CIA torture and brainwashing techniques on me. My mom used very advanced brainwashing. She would constantly try to break my sense of reality, and she used gaslighting on what feels like an industrial scale. She would constantly change the goalposts of reality. She would have basically multiple different dimensions of lies or different narratives that she would jump between seamlessly, so she basically had multiple both kinds of reality that she would throw at me. So when I got used to one of the narratives she was doing, she would jump to another. An example is that she constantly hated men and would rag on them. And she would say stuff, for example, Rudyard, who has helped me the most in my life, men or women? And I said women. I was just tired. And she said, you're saying that to please me. You don't actually believe that. So that kind of bullshit. Or she would offer to drive me to a friend's house, and I would tell the friend I'd visit. And then the day of, she would drive me, and then she would tell me, oh, I never agreed to that, which is just maddening. She would constantly change reality and what she said to destroy any sense of sanity I could develop. My mom said she tortured me because she loved me. She told me God told her to do it, and that by torturing me, she was having an enormous impact on history. She said that God told her that no matter how cruel and petty she got, it would have an exponentially positive effect on history, and so she had to torture me as much as possible. And she attributed cosmic importance to me. She said that by destroying me, she was destroying men. And she said she kept on removing her responsibility for the situation and the locus control, where she said she wasn't doing this. God was forcing her to do this. Because when God gives you an order, you do it. And my mom is a literal schizophrenic who has multiple inner monologues operating at once. And she would alternate between different monologues and narratives, between aggrandizing and self-loathing and other things. How she perceives reality is not how we perceive reality, and her is a warped, twisted version of healthy consciousness. So it's impossible for us to understand how she thinks, because she's become so... She's lost her soul. I don't see her as a person anymore, if I'm honest. There's nothing there. And my mom unironically practiced black magic and satanic rituals. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. She said it was very important to cement the historic changes that came about from her torturing me. I don't remember all the details, but it was pretty horrific. My mom claimed to have magical powers that she used against me. She definitely saw this in spiritual terms, and at least the stuff she was using, like incense, idols, spells, and supplements, all seemed pretty satanic and not Christian. She did go through a Christian fundamentalist phase, though. She's a very intelligent person. Remember that she went to Columbia University and was valedictorian of her high school. In between raping and beating me, she would explain the nature of the Platonic forms, Goethe's philosophy, the folk ways of English rural life, and she's a very good cook, another skill she taught me. She was obsessed with ingredient quality, like she drank raw milk and she was getting organic food. That was her big thing because she was a brewer and she ran a restaurant when I was a kid. My mom was very clever at playing the system and psychologically manipulating me. For example, she had some friends stay over in an extra room as a bribe to have an alibi for the legal battle with my dad, and with my sister terrified, I was the only person who spoke out against my mom. She said my dad was beating me, and she sued anyone who disagreed with her in the court system with corruption charges. She put a truly vast amount of thought into psychologically breaking me. An example of this is that I moved 13 times before I turned age 15, or it's 15 times before 13, I forget exactly. I moved a lot as a kid. And then, mostly due to my mom being mentally ill and various complex issues with housing or money or whatever. And once my mom lost custody of me and my sister, she stayed in the same house continuously. So she was purposely moving us around to break our will. And she took me out of Chad's Ford, which I loved with all my friends, I think because she was worried I'd get close with them and then tell them about my mom raping me as a kid. I'd feel safe enough to share my experiences, and then she'd go to jail. And my mom would tell me growing up that if I had told anyone, I would never see her again in my life. So I would not underestimate my mother. Assume she's making more calculations than you understand, and assume it's operating on a deeper level of analysis with a very warped mind. The thing that shocked me when I recovered the memories was the insane sheer heroism I fought back with. I look back on it with complete awe, because I just can't believe I did it, that this is me. And how much insanity I was able to muster to fight back her insanity. I was so ridiculously heroic, I have no idea how we even did it. When my mom was beating me, I would scream dozens of times, "Why don't you kill me, coward? Unless you kill me, I win, and you won't because you're a coward." I don't care how much you make me suffer as you suffer. I don't care whether I live or die. Kill me, kill me, kill me. And I'd say, hit me over the head with a book, Mom. Do it. I beg you. You can hit me. And I said, when I grow up, I'll kill you and your God. I'll kill all of you. I hate you so much I'll grow up to be strong and kill you. You're all going to be dead. And I made a blood oath before God and my mother that I would murder her when I grew up. It took me 10 EMDRs to train myself out of that. I would fantasize about gouging her eyes out in her sleep. I threatened to do it like a dozen times. After she was asleep, half a dozen times I went down to the kitchen and grabbed one of the knives. I told myself it would only take 10 seconds to go for her eyes and her throat. I would fantasize about cutting her throat out and letting the blood go on the white sheets. You can never wash them out after that. That's how I knew I would kill her. I imagined going for the eyes, and I would claw them until I felt her brain, and then I knew she'd be dead. And I thought I was such a pussy for not doing it because I studied the legality, and I realized that I would not go to jail for 7. I would basically face no legal consequences for murdering my mom at age 7. So I felt like I was just being a coward. Part of the reason the Irish weren't used as slaves or indentured servants during the colonial period is that the Irish were known for a nasty habit of slitting their masters' throats in their sleep and then running for the hills, because they would rather live free than die in slavery. And it's crazy that the throat slitting thing, that was something I nearly did half a dozen times. And it shows how culture and blood can impart a group trait onto a child who's 6 who doesn't know any of this stuff. I knew my mom worked with the devil, and I would call her demonically possessed to her face. I would have philosophic debates every day between God and the devil. I realized that I was living in hell. Every night I would send my soul to God in heaven. I would imagine sending my soul as far away as possible. I would literally spend 5 minutes every single night visualizing the sheer distance from heaven from where I was. I just wanted to die and go to heaven and to see God, which is partly why I egged my mom on. I wanted her to kill me so I could just die. And so I would constantly have visualizations in the shower, especially, where I was talking to the devil, and the devil was around me at all times, and he kept on asking for my soul, and I would just put my ears and go, blah, 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 because I said, there's no reason for me to trust you because I have no power over you. I'm completely powerless, so you're just going to lie to me. And my parents taught me a lot of folk tales and mythology, and I knew that you could never get through a deal with the devil. It's just always a bad choice. So I resisted the devil, and I never listened to him. One of the most important and seminal moments of my life occurred in the trauma. I entered this sort of dream state as my mom abused me, and the way I was able to forget it was I processed all of the abuse, which my mom only did at night, as dream time. And so I thought, I would tell myself I never sleep, because the dream world took on this bizarre life of itself that was so much more epic than my daily life. And it was so painful to go to school and have to pretend everything's fine, especially with the 2-hour commute at the time. I don't even speak the language. And my parents didn't teach me how to read or to tie my own shoelaces. So I had to learn all that stuff. Like, my parents were kind of out of the picture until I was 10. I caught up on a lot of stuff when I was 10. But I had to live in this boring school life. It was so saccharine, and saccharine is unnecessarily sweet, because everywhere the posters on the wall say, believe in yourself, follow your dreams, listen to your heart. And I hate them so much, because all the teachers said, oh, you can care about us, and we love you, whatever issues you have. And as we'll see later, that was all a complete lie. The system covered this up. And I can never forgive the sheer hypocrisy. And I was forced to live this double life between this insane fantasy life at nighttime and this boring Francis Fukuyama end of history, bureaucratic, managerial rest of life. I was forced to live a double life, and it's the origin of the split I have inside my personality between my external facing and the PTSD. And for the very important things that happened, I entered into this sort of mystic dream state where I actually had a relatively easy way to communicate with the spirit world when my mom was raping me, because it's such an extreme emotion, it kind of shatters your framework for how you perceive consciousness. I could explain that more if you'd like, but apparently, from what I've studied, a lot of the most advanced mystics were raped as children, because rape shuts down your brain and it hits the entire part of you. You are violated on such a deep basis that it kind of shuts down a lot of your concepts of sense of self, and it shuts down how you reformulate the universe. And I would pray to God every night, and I would tell him, please get me out of hell, God. I know you sent me to hell, and I know it's not my fault, but I'll do anything if you get me out of hell. And God said, I'll take you up on that bet, kid. And then when the first few times my mom raped me, I saw myself in the future at my current age, and I couldn't believe it at all. And God said, Rudyard, when you become a young man, you will be so admirable. Your current self could not believe who you became. And God said, I've had dreams as long as I can remember that I made a deal with a god before my birth in a blue room. And I stared at the god, and he had a specific task, and he would give me things, and he'd give me advantages to achieve the task. I just had to do it. It would be so horrible, but at the same time, it would be incredible. And the way time works is that I made that deal in the heat of the moment, and then because God can move backwards in time, it reset my life so that I had the deal. And the entire rest of the story is the deal I made in the blue room. It's the most important thing in my life. And when I was a kid, I remember my mom raping me, and I felt completely rejected by the society. Society had no interest in this romantic or fun or that sort of the world, where I was obsessed with knights and Vikings and pirates. And as a kid, I said, I want to do anything I can to show you the beauty I see of the world, because the world's so beautiful to me. And one of the worst aspects of this is how complicit the system was in my mom's abuse. I had told about 4 or 5 custody officials in that Chester County sent all of these social workers to assess my family situation. They basically all covered it up except 1 or 2. They were all trying to blame my dad, since that was the easy answer for their careers. And their system, they needed to blame the man, and as bureaucrats, they had no incentive to intervene, given it would only give them slightly more work. The most disgusting thing is that these people were all trained to literally do this fucking job. This is the one job they have. These bureaucrats don't fucking work. They work like 10 hours a week, and they can't save a kid from getting raped. What the fuck is wrong with them? My mom stopped beating me and raping me when I was 10 years old. At that point, I became physically strong. I started beating her physically. The first time that happened, she stopped. Past that point, all of this raping stopped, although you could see some of the abuse earlier in other ways. Past that point, I mentally repressed everything. Since how am I supposed to live with this as a teenager? My move to Texas was a complete restart in my life. I had wiped the slate clean of all of my previous social networks, and my previous goal of being a degenerate influencer seemed disgusting to me now. To be frank, the first 6 months of my life after moving to Texas was just mentally processing the stuff I said before. I had to live through that. After about 6 months in Texas, I realized I was addicted to comfort, and what I was doing now wasn't living. In our current society, we have this ideal of living a normal, happy life. And what that means is just being married and being materially comfortable. It really means just having money. But money doesn't make people happy. I've tested that thesis. So what is living about? And what we're doing now isn't living. I could feel and sense the collapse of society occur in real time, even in Texas, which is one of the better places in America for just socially surviving. And life today has this horrifying postmodern terror to it that's difficult to articulate in a real way. I can feel it, and I feel really disgusted with it. The way we live isn't living. We scroll through Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as a substitute for actual human life. Our ancestors, even our parents, had lives. They had kids, families, stable work, friends networks, communities, and hobbies. Today, people just have the internet. The average young person spends 7 to 8 hours besides school on the internet. That's their entire day. We have no hobbies besides these screens. We're completely addicted. It's disgusting. All of us are addicted, and no one's going to call it out. And it's shut down the entire rest of our lives. And I have a lot of positive traits, as you also see from this video. But I was looking at the future of my life, and I was thinking, this can't be the rest of my life. I've tried the hardest. I should have been the person who succeeded. But then I look at the Zoomer condition. I'm thinking, there's no way to succeed. This is a rigged game, and there's no way you're going to end up with a happy life unless you try to completely shatter the glass. And I feel I speak for all of society that the period since COVID's been absolutely brutal. This era of history is just psychologically intolerable, and it's driving us completely crazy. I mean, we don't think we're cutting off children's genitals to change their sex. We're letting in millions of immigrants across the border. We're so sick. It's so obvious. And see and feel you, even if you can't. I can see your suffering every day, and I find it unbearable. I would do anything to help you. I'm sorry how much pain you're in. And you might say I'm projecting, which I partly am, because that's just how empathy works. You project a little. My financial situation got worse over this time period, where I made what should have been an innocuous error, where I posted my second podcast on the main channel. And I thought YouTube has a tab that makes it processed by the algorithm as a podcast. And then what happened is that it tanked my position in the algorithm because I got some videos with 50,000 views, other videos with 500,000 views. So 50,000 videos killed my position in the algorithm for a year. And sponsors pulled out for a long time. The leftist ad block against conservatives cannot be overstated, where as of now, 90% of ad dollars are controlled by leftists to be used explicitly against conservatives. So conservatives fight for the final 10%, which is why a lot of my advertisers are people from the Balkans or Eastern Europe or Asia or something like that, because they don't feel any of our current qualms. From what I can tell, and I'm probably getting these numbers wrong, but leftist content creators make 5 times as much money per view as I do. That we don't live in a capitalist or a meritocratic society because of my racial type and my skin and my sex, as well as my political views, which are the reasonable political opinions for my people's survival. I am blocked out of all society. University, most jobs won't hire me because I'm conservative. Consulting positions, every single bureaucratic association is blocking out conservatives and young white men. I have a larger audience than lots of TV stations. I have 2 to 6 million independent viewers a month. That's independent, different people. The numbers might, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I see from my YouTube analytics. And sometimes it goes to 1.5. But I'm not rich anymore, and I have to be conservative with my spending. I really dislike it because I look at TV stations that have far lower viewership. They get tens of millions of dollars. I know lots of sponsorships in tech for audiences 1/10 my size that make 3 times as much per deal. I know lots of leftist creators making 3 times as much deal as I do. And because conservatives are just blocked out. I haven't gone on vacation in over a year, for example. The problem is we've hollowed out all of life so that the only thing we have in life is screens. We got rid of community, we got rid of religion, we got rid of marriage, we got rid of the nation, we got rid of social clubs, we got rid of everything. And so we just stare at screens. And so even if you're wealthy or successful, you're still staring at a fucking screen. And this is what we're stuck here with. I'm also pretty clear I'm shadow banned. I say that since there are certain growth curves I see in videos because I study the algorithm. I've been doing this for a decade, where the video goes up and then the growth angle collapses, which is not mathematically what should be happening. And YouTube has a tremendous amount of records for shadow banning conservatives. I have significantly more subscribers than I had before, but I'm making less money off ads. I'm making less money off sponsorships, where I was making significantly more money 3 years ago and 2 years ago when I had a third of my current subscribers. That's how crazy this is. And we know YouTube's parent company, Google, the people who made Gemini, they're incredibly politically biased. That summer was brutally hot, and I was stuck at home. My PTSD was really bad, and I was in excruciating physical pain all the time. I was also still in the process of emotionally remembering everything I said before. My relationship with my father got much better over this time period, is now at the best point ever, as long as I've known him, where after I moved down to Texas, I also told him about everything that happened in my childhood with my mom and all that stuff, and he was very accepting. And he's also really excited about my other projects. And I told him about this video. I showed it to him, and it's cool. It's nice when your life gets better. As I gradually healed, I started to wonder what I actually wanted out of life. And after a bunch of different short realizations, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to go as hard as possible. And I have various connections across conservative media, and I keep a pulse on what's going on in different areas. I started piecing together a picture in which I realized conservatism was an almost all complete anarchy, where no one was in charge, no one had a concept what was happening, no one had a concept what to do about it, or even the barometers of how to relate to it, or parameters. The whole field seems to be in collapse, with very few figures willing to take responsibility for conservative culture itself. It's just Trump being a Chad holding stuff up, and then nothing else. You guys don't know what you believe, you don't know what your direction is, you don't know how to relate to it, you don't know how to talk to young people. And I realized conservative culture, just the underlying nature, besides just winning elections, is just completely dead. And I don't know what's happening. And I saw this with a lot of the creative tension that conservatism has, because I noticed with conservatism, it has lots of very smart and very capable people. Whenever I go on Twitter, I'm shocked at the level of IQ, which is hard to believe for Twitter, but there's a lot of smart stuff on Twitter. I'm shocked by the direction of the people, especially as I met more of them in person. I thought these were incredibly admirable people, and there's so much stuff going on here, and there's so much dough to play with. Then I realized no one wanted to take advantage of this. No one was looking to lead the right. No one was looking to do cool stuff. No one was looking for the future of conservatism or how cultural ideas in the past related to conservatism. This weird thing that I call high schoolism, because in almost every single industry I've studied in America, it's run like high school, where there's pre-established cliques at who's cool and who's not cool. It's done for very arbitrary reasons, relating often to corruption or to friends of friends or to college. And it's just incredible incompetence. And things are done for not very rational reasons, with the bureaucracy crushing everything. And I found this with the military-industrial complex. I found this with academia. I found this with the tech parts of the tech industry. Another part of the tech industry is really aggro and really capable. And just almost every single industry I could see in America seemed like it was high school. And that shocked me. And we're just so corrupt, and we don't notice. And modern society seems like a ship that's sinking, and no one noticed. I met a girl who was part of a eugenics organization. I personally do not support eugenics. She wanted to be in a polygamous relationship with a great man, and apparently I had good genetics in her worldview. I want you to be passively pleasant enough that I enjoy the act of being with you. And my current issue with dating is I can get lots of women who I can sleep with. Stuff like this people get super sensitive about, because there's a degree of envy and there's a degree of, are you lying? But my thing is it's relatively easy for me to get women to sleep with. And it's very difficult to find women I respect enough that I would marry her or even date her, because that involves me seeing her on a semi-regular basis. And I'm just not in a place where just the passive quality of person. Like, do you not lie? Are you nice to me? Do you treat me with respect? Do you not insult me? These are just the basics. And then most young women I meet, and again, I've had like sample size of dozens. I was going to Kurt Doolittle's conference, and then I stayed at her dorm in Harvard for a few days. And we'll get to more of that later. That becomes a bigger subplot later, I believe. But none of the Harvard people could do shit. It was so crazy. And I was talking to a Harvard professor, and I could sense that he was a good man, and he was a man that I can respect. And so I won't say the name or any of that stuff, but I was talking to him about human sciences, and he said, I only look at stuff with data. If there's not data attached to it, I refuse to look at an idea. And I said, you've cut out 85% of human thinking. And that was what I thought talking to Harvard, talking to different people there, that these people have incredible tunnel vision and they can't see their whole environment. And they had no clue at all what's happening. The American elite has no idea how much normal people are suffering or how things are falling apart. Another story, when I was at Harvard, I was at a cafe because I didn't get much sleep the night before. So I went and I was exhausted. I was barely conscious. And then two relatively attractive women sat down in the seat next to me, and they were surrounded by the Harvard Comedy Club. And they were trolling me. Open your bag, kid, because I use Mexican artisanal bags. I use leather artisanal Mexican bags. So I showed them the bag, like, who are you? I told them about my life. I told them the stuff I had done, about all those things. And they were super impressed at the end. They started out with roasting me, and then at the end they were congratulating me because I was showing them how I was carrying an Esteban cigar, which is one of my favorite brands, next to JFC Fuller's History of Western Warfare, next to the leather bag. And with each story, I was telling them more about my life. And at the end they said, "We're so glad we were in a timeline where we got to meet you." I forgot to say this, so I'll throw it in later, but guys at the Harvard humanities department noticed me. They knew I was What If Altist, and they brought me around among the staffers, and they were fans, and they were all supportive. And I thought, we have already won the culture war. And you find with a lot of the science authors that people don't believe in the blank slate, and this is a bipartisan position. They don't believe that in innate progress. Religious departments don't believe in secularism anymore, or the disenchanted universe, or objectivity, or separation. These are all complex things. I got to make a video about them, where the science doesn't believe the left anymore. The left's operating out of a century-old science, and we haven't noticed yet. But their order is weakening and has nothing holding it up left. Things also just got worse as I saw more of the world. When I try to understand someone or something, I try to see the inner logic of their thoughts. Basically, what mental assumptions and what parameters of their mental process would their operating system have to be in order for the choices they reach to be the logically consistent outcome inside their worldview. Because everyone's logical by their own definitions. You can see their thoughts to see how their mind works. And I saw that society was facing something vastly worse than what I had imagined 2 years before. The abbreviated answer I like to say is psychological Black Death and mass utopia. When I moved to Texas, I was coming to terms with these emotionally, and the fundamental reality that Mouse Utopia was something very real, in that it would take people's souls or their mental concepts of the world. The Nazis, the communists, totalitarianism is a demonic plague. And I use the word demonic because the ancients and the medievals saw demons as negative psychological archetypes, and those exist by definition, and they're spread socially as well, which is the nature of culture. And so we have had these negative psychological manifestations take over our entire society, especially so our ruling class. Our ruling class is run by suicidal, deranged, nihilistic, insane people, and we don't notice. And this is all stuff that's obvious. Every single field, Hollywood, academia, corporate America, is controlled by these negative psychological archetypes that want to kill us all. I have more experience with how bad insanity can be for obvious reasons, and so these things weigh on my mind very heavily. I'm pretty young, and it took a lot of time and effort for me to handle being responsible for this future after having lived through so much trauma. It just felt deeply unfair. I faced the childhood I did, and now this is the social and political reality of the situation. This feels cosmically unfair. I'm sorry. It's just reality. And I can't say how many nights I begged to have my fate changed. How many nights I begged God that this didn't have to be my life. Nowhere I looked were people talking at the population crash, people talking at the psychological breakdown of Zoomers, how Zoomers are constantly overworked, how everyone's depressed. There was no leadership. No one was even thinking about it. That's the horrible thing. Past a certain point, when you think so much about this stuff, you realize you have to do something about it. I don't want to have to live with this bullshit. So why am I supposed to put up with this? I'm the one who has to get the rotten end of the deal with the DEI stuff all the time. I am the exemplification of what DEI hates. I am an upper-class, white, Protestant male, talented, high status. I am exactly what leftism hates. And they trick you into thinking it's caring about black people. Oh, God. And I like to say that the problem is I'm stuck here. And I'm going to be stuck here for a while, hopefully, because I'm so young. And so I kind of have to intervene in the game as my top motivation for establishing a sort of society where I can have children. Yeah, I've cried about a dozen times about that. I realized that whatever I had to do, I had to help American conservatism. I live and die by rightism. If the right loses, it's because I'm dead. A little over a year ago, I had a dozen friends hit me up in a 2-week period saying that I had to form an organization of my contacts of sharp, young, rightist men. People frequently tell me I have the largest network of anyone they've met. But my attitude is I'm here to empathize with others. Whenever I talk to someone, I say who they are as a person, and then I ask them, what do you want from me? And so I'm here to help you. So if you have certain tasks you'd like me to get done in a peaceful and ethical and loving way, I'd be happy to. We are a human capital organization, which means we exist to improve the human character of politics and society. I believe in masculine excellence in a straight way, and life is better with friends. For the media company, we're making a magazine soon, and then we ultimately like to make video content to be a sort of news or traditional media is really bad and really lame. And I would like to be a person that you can trust, where you can say, Rudyard vetted this to be honest, because I've been lied to so many times in my life that I don't want to lie to someone else. I read enough history, and when you read enough history, you realize that people get fucked over all the time, and it's so unfair. If no one else is going to do this, I'm going to try my best. And I'm excited for the media company. I think they could do really, really well, and I think the media company is oriented around living history or looking to the past, enjoying the present, and preparing for the future. I am a person who I need to have space in order to lead or in order to make decisions. And so I believe in the decentralization of power, where this is a radically decentralized. But I built my leadership structure off actually pirate warbands and Cossack warbands. I say because I'm Irish. That's a cultural tick. My attitude is that for these sorts of things, culture itself is the most important thing. Yeah, but the thing with culture is it creates an underlying almost nuclear core in human nature that allows you to do a lot of different things. And the thing that we're failing the hardest at is culture. And most of the West's issues are cultural problems. And I take complete responsibility for solving the West's cultural problems. We'll get to that later. But yeah, that's what we're about. Upon my honor, I will maintain the quality of this organization. Your son, if he leaves my organization, he will be more handsome, he will be smarter, he will be braver, he will be more charming, he will pass on your ancestral line. This is my duty. You have my word of honor that I will try to make your son as good as possible. And I'd like you to help hold me responsible for not slipping up. And every great empire was formed because men took responsibility for holding each other accountable to get better. This is just so dope. I really love the act of being a leader. I feel truly alive for the first time. I can feel your energy and I can connect with you even through the screen. There's nothing that can beat the feeling of speaking in front of a crowd, channeling its energy into your words, and as you breathe in unison with the crowd. There's nothing better than holding the knife of decision in the air, where you're about to make a decision, trying to figure out where you strike. The act of making a decision and executing is so hype. And there's nothing more fun than assessing every single other player in the game and finding their strengths and weaknesses. God willing, I would like to do this for the rest of my life. So I basically decided to take the future of conservatism into my own hands. I'm here to cooperate with people. Whatever that needs, I'll do it. The manifesto I wrote, the manifesto for the New Right, that was dictated me by God. And God told me that I should integrate science, Christianity, and Darwinism into a single coherent theory. I've been regularly communicating with God about what he believes the future of the right philosophically should be. And this is what I'm about to feed you in this video is the best attempt. It will not be perfect. And this is a work in process where I integrate with you as a public. We talk to each other and I change my ideas over time so that we can help all of each other to attain the best state possible. The ideology I've been developing I call formism so far, although I'm not attached to that name. Formism is the idea that we should replicate the divine forms in material form, that we should study God and the divine Platonic forms through mysticism to make technologies which can model the divine will as closely as possible, that the force that powers the universe is responsibility and honor. It's a socially conservative, meritocratic, masculine, martial, mystic, and yet technologically progressive worldview, as you'll see over the course of this video. God is not satisfied with us and says that our current society is an abomination of degeneracy, demons, and evil. As I've come closer with God, I've come to completely loathe the current society we live in. We live in the world before the flood, like in the Old Testament, where before God smites everyone, and the degeneracy is so evil, our society is dying in real time, in front of our own eyes, yet we're too complacent to realize it. As time came to pass, I came to realize the world of modernism that I thought I had lived in for my whole life was a lie and was never real at all, that I had been duped. And as I saw the world through God, my entire perspective on the universe changed. I stopped seeing the world as right or left, but rather upon, does it carry God's positive life charge or not? Is it a higher form where it is capable of greater complexity and more aligned with the divine will, or is it a lower form built off pettiness? I came to realize that God was the only force strong enough to avoid mouse utopia. God was the force missing from our society, and that everything was a false cardboard imitation of something real, since it lacked the inner spirit of God which permeated it. We try to imitate God's excellence only to fail and grow resentful. Our entire age of history is lies made as humans tried to make that which only God can do. I started praying to God all the time. This was a side effect of my PTSD. There were too many nights I couldn't sleep. PTSD is so horrible, I can't overstate it. Growing up, I had always believed that the true bedrock of my character was honor, that when things were the worst they could ever be, that my reflexive concept of honor was something that I could always rely on. That worked when the suffering of my childhood was at its worst, when I had a really horrible external threat. But once I lost immediate risks, I needed a moral code besides honor to process the world through. However, with the year upon year of horrible pain, honor still wasn't enough. Who am I to stand against the world? I'm just a weak mortal who suffers every day, who's fucking always in pain. I was thinking today about how every day of my life, ever since I can remember, I have been in physical pain. PTSD is so funny. I will literally fight my mom to the death, I'll go to hell, or drop out of school, but then I get anxious about a clock in a different room chiming so I can't sleep at night. Or I think about, do I send this text? I stopped doing this in the last 6 months. Do I send a text at 12:03 or 12, which is better? And the real answer is 12:03. I get anxious over little stuff rather than the big stuff. It's funny, but it's human nature. I realized that Christ was the only thing capable of giving my life peace. After a long day of suffering through the horrors of PTSD, when it's 4 a.m. and I know I'm not going to sleep that night, I take various supplements and pass out thinking about Christ's love. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, that all life has already been solved since I follow Christ, since you are knowing what doing the right thing is. After having a schizophrenic mother and an autistic father, something I really like about Christianity is that if you follow it correctly, you can face any life situation, and religion is a technique on how to deal with it. Due to my mother's gaslighting, I've always been paranoid that I've been crazy over my life. I've always been scared that I will lose control of my own mind and descend into madness under the horror I've seen. I have a pretty good mental map of the spirit world at this point, where I've been gaining it from different spiritual forces. And what Christianity does is it operates like a triangle in the spirit world, where the tree of life is all conscious thought in the biosphere, while in the tree of life is things you can see in mystic experiences. It's just the nature of the spirit world itself. And then Christianity's the cross, as its dominant symbol suggests, in that Christ and Christianity allows you to move up and down from higher forms out of lower forms. So this is the cross. You have human life as this rod. This is two-dimensional reality. And then Christianity lets you become a better person. It lets you to move up the cross. And it makes you more like God. And Christianity is very effective at that thing, making you good, but then it doesn't have mental techniques for other things, because even Christianity, although it was made by God, it does not have techniques for every single element of human life, especially the ways to relate to power that stem from industrial technology, which is what I'd like to do, where I am fully a Christian, and if I say anything that ever contradicts the Bible in these things, I immediately submit. I do not fuck with Yahweh. He wins every fight. But I am here to help life develop and help the biosphere attain greater excellence. Remember, in the spirit world, Christianity is the triangle, and then you have the tree, which is all human life. So Christianity is here to make you a better person. It's not here to increase your reproductive fitness. I was able to trust again through Christ since I knew that if I followed Christianity, I would have a path through the swamp of life. I was able to conceptualize Christianity as a psychic charge that I can pull energy, spiritual energy from. So I could sense Christ as a very powerful source to siphon energy from, and I conceptualized my relationship with Christianity as a psychic string where I could just draw spiritual energy, like a mother with a baby with the umbilical cord. Basically, a way to conceptualize an incredibly powerful warren, and a warren for a mystic is a place that you draw energy from. And so Christianity is an incredibly powerful warren where people around the world and over history have developed techniques to siphon psychic energy from God to them so that as they pray, they become more like God. This is quite obvious when you look at history. This is exactly what the nature of Christianity is. And it suggests as well that people can have religious experiences, that there are these psychic warrens, which could be ideas, which could be religions, that people share ideas with, and they're operating out of this shared idea space, which ultimately must exist in the spirit world because an idea must exist somewhere. Christ's great gift to us is that when people hear about my childhood, they say, I'm glad I'm not that kid. I'm glad I'm not that kid for my whole fucking life. And between childhood trauma, not being understood by others psychologically, and the baby boomers leaving society as a dumpster fire, as well as getting friggin' messages from the spirit world, my whole life has been people pitying me and then not doing shit about it. Thank you, Christ. You will always have my eternal loyalty. And I think it's because the Jews have been that people of history. They're the people that people keep taking pot shots at. And Christ is great for those who have been unfairly nailed to the cross. And so I'm eternally grateful for Christ for giving me a way to get out of PTSD. I wrote this video since my life goal as a child and adult was to brag as much as possible. This is a video I wrote where I do get to brag, and there are a few accomplishments I'd like to briefly gloat over before I continue dictating things God said to me. One time I went viral for posting a photo of me when someone posted a really nerdy photo as a caption to something I said. The real photo of me was so handsome as a contrast that it got nearly 1 million views. I am going to hold the I was so handsome I went viral card over people for the rest of my life. So I've just stopped caring, and I'm just going to tell you folks the total truth. I've been using a cocktail of supplements to survive the physical suffering of PTSD. That's not an exaggeration in that without these supplements to loosen up my amygdala or my emotional brain, my amygdala shuts my brain down, so I lose the ability to speak, move, or think. There have literally been dozens of times in my life I lose the ability to speak or walk. The only way I ever sleep is with these supplements and relaxants. Kratom is the substance that saved my life on PTSD. I'm not going to lie, kratom is addictive and is not a perfect substance. It's a low-level opiate, which is a traditional remedy from Thailand, where among the local peoples, they take kratom to work their 12-hour shifts in the rubber plantations and with hard factory work. As I said before, it's literally saved my life. I would not be able to physically move for years without it. My life, I have gone through kratom withdrawal 6 times. It's not that bad for me, although I know it's worse for other people. Where for me, the withdrawal is only a single day. For other people, it can be weeks. And each time, after a few months, I relapse back onto kratom because something bad happened in my life, like a work issue or problem with family, and I needed just to wake up and do my job. Even with all the issues, I give kratom an overwhelmingly positive review. It's way better than taking antidepressants and especially benzos. I was looking at all of the alternatives that the regime wants you to take for PTSD, and they're benzos. Look at what benzos did to Peterson. That's a 6-month withdrawal, not a 2-day withdrawal. That's a real issue. And my home state of Pennsylvania got wiped out by way more powerful opiates. Times I talked to God, reading, traveling, it was powered off the green haze, as I called it. And again, if you are watching this and you have made it this far, I trust that you should be responsible. You should use these supplements in a way that is responsible and you should in your life. And if you are addicted and it's bad, you should stop being addicted. I speak to you as an adult. And CBD has also helped me a lot lately. And it annoys me our society's drug culture where people in my life, especially boomers, have freaked out at me taking this stuff. And I'm thinking, alcohol's worse. I think opiate withdrawal is actually a useful parallel for our current society because I think we are so, even with all this, I still think kratom's a good product. Bye. Hi, everybody. It's hilarious that I'm holding you guys in some kind of hostage before I tell you the word of God. Is in a previous society, we had gender roles, so each sex did the things they liked. I know most women will be mortified to get on this call and talk about talking to God and leading and opening up like this, but I fucking love this stuff. And if we had gender roles, I'm just saying as a brief psyop, we could split ourselves up into doing tasks we actually like as each sex. And I think about the last story for the last year of my life is that in some ways it's been pretty boring because my life is a lot of crazy adventures. I've mostly stayed in Texas working on my projects. But in other ways, this last year is by far the most interesting period of my life in a way that cannot be overstated. And I walk around my neighborhood every day and the way I process the world is I pick a location and I mentally attach emotional significance to it. So when I pass there, I register the emotional state I normally have. My life is really strange and I spend several hours a day trying to emotionally process it. It's hard for me to watch a lot of media because it's just not interesting enough. And my life is so nuts. I spend a lot of time trying to deconstruct what it feels like. And all the time, on a regular basis, I walk around often past midnight just to clear my head because I find just the energy during the day overwhelming. I like it when everything's quiet. I like it when everything is really low vibes because that's when I can think. I need to have a lot of space to be able to think. And so I love walking around past midnight. And this is what and my family has a genetic ability to see in the dark. So my dad, for example, kept our house super dim and it freaked his girlfriend out because my dad and I could see really well in the darkness and she couldn't. And so she got triggered that we kept our house at super low lighting. So I'll just walk around at night and I can see everything. Even if there's no moon, I can see in the dark. So I don't really need a flashlight or anything. The dialogues when I walk mostly consist of me talking to God, and for the longest time, that consisted of me complaining to God about how unfair it was he made me suffer this much, and then secondarily, me asking him about how the universe works. And I take CBD every single day. However, the CBD doesn't really get me high. I can think clearly. I've recorded parts of this on CBD. And there are certain areas of the trail, as I said before, when I look at them, I realize it makes me think of certain things in my life. So I have certain postmarks on the trail that influence how I think about the world. I was praying to God to end my suffering for like the 10,000th time, and God did reply this time. However, it was a different God than the ones I spoke to before. This was the Norse god Odin. I will later explain to you over the course of this video why me communing with a pagan god does not count as heresy. I've thought this through. He said my PTSD was a tool for him. He said my PTSD was a tool for him, and I had already completed the task he asked me to do. He said that he had cleaned me out of my PTSD. There'd be some ups and downs, but it was basically over. And that was right. This happened like 3 months ago, and my PTSD's gotten so much better. I feel happy. I feel relaxed. I feel so grateful. Thank you, God. Thank you for healing me of PTSD. I prayed for you thousands of times to do this, and thank you so much. I'm just gonna keep thanking you in front of this audience to demonstrate how grateful I am. You don't understand. And he said that he had been we already did that. Oh yeah, he said that he had been using me and that I'd already done most of the work he wanted me to do. He said that I didn't have to worry anymore and the rest of my life would be a lot easier. He said that although my future life might be difficult, it would never have the psychic torment that I experienced before, which was more painful than the physical pain I could experience in the future. And nothing would match the psychological hell I was living in. He told me that I wasn't going to get any new memories from my childhood and that I could stop worrying about my childhood trauma. That if I just let go of PTSD, he would give me something way better to deal with. And he started showing me visions as I walked around my neighborhood that morning. I saw the world as a unified, beautiful place in which everything is connected and every action affects every action, and meaning is wrought into the substructure of the universe, and that all things are innately meaningful by their design. The world has so much meaning that you will find meaning when you do things because there is so much meaning to be found in the world. You just have to be open to God's love. You just have to be humble and realize that you are weak and powerless. And once you realize your own innate powerlessness, you can assess your situation correctly to find meaningness. But the first step is submission to God. And after you submit to God, you can make an accurate assessment of your environment based out of humility to attain as much excellence as possible. This is the way. And I saw all of conscious life, including spirits, men, and animals, as the anima mundi, where all of our conscious experiences feed together into the living consciousness of the anima mundi, which is Latin for the mind of the world, which is God's way of processing consciousness and life on earth. Or it's called in the Christian tradition, the Holy Spirit. Yahweh uses the Holy Spirit to manifest through the world. And I could see all the sorrows and horrors of my life and realized it was all part of a plan which balanced out at the end. I saw that the lack of magic and mystery I had experienced upon seeing modern life was itself a sub-aspect of the universe. The death of God was a scheme by God to show us how much we needed him for his brief absence, being only a few centuries, which God processes as less than a second, made us miserable to the point of suicide. He said, I let you guys have autonomy to show you how silly you are. I could sense that I had just done something incredibly positive and beautiful that I had to share with the world. I felt what I had done was so profoundly good in a way I couldn't quantify it, in the same way that I couldn't quantify the suffering of my childhood or hell. Over the next few months, I started negotiating terms with the god Odin. Odin is a messenger god for the spirit world, in that he is capable and designed to represent the unified psyche of the spirit world, which operates independently from God. The spirit world, again, is the anima mundi, or the Holy Spirit, and Odin is here to protect it and represent its will. I repeat, fellow Christians, please give me a second for the rest of the video to explain to you how this works. The spirit world will make enormous sense if you give me a second to talk about it, and Yahweh creates certain angels which serve roles he doesn't want to do. Yahweh's the boss, and so if he doesn't want to do it, he has someone else do it. Yahweh delegates in the same way any leader will delegate, and since there are billions of people in the world, in the same way that the material world mirrors the physical, there are billions of spirits in the spirit world of differing levels of morality, motivations, backstory, and origin. The spirit world is just as, if not vastly more complicated than our material world. And the spirit world is a highly complex jungle or forest with many angels, demons, spirits, and psychic regions or continents that are different. The government agencies of the two most powerful countries in the world in the 20th century have scientifically proven the existence of the spirit world. And what they found is that the spirit world operates pretty closely to what traditional world religions operate as. And this is, in a lot of ways, informed by the CIA's research, where they found that there are concentric rings which lead out towards higher and higher levels of abstraction until you hit infinity or God, in that God exists out of time, where God's infinity is a counterbalance to the finiteness of the universe. Infinity and finite must be balanced for the universe to reach a sort of coherent whole. And what both of those government agencies found as well is that the spirit world has a lot of geographic world religions. It's infinitely large. And what you do is that you psychically project to a certain region of the spirit world where you desire something, you search for it. And the spirit world can only give you something if you use like a searchlight. And so the world's religions and the world's philosophies and ideologies are all searchlights in the infinite void of the spirit world. And when you find a spirit, you're nice to it and communicate with it. And when you treat spirits with respect, which we haven't been doing, they help you, which is how every world religion works, where people are trying to be nice to the spirits to give them what they'd like. So the spirits help you, where they let you have access to their warren. And the spirit in the material worlds demands the other to psychologically balance each other. Spirits are looking for material bodies looking for spirits, because much like men and women, they are in a constant duality, where the spirit is masculine and the material is feminine. Men create with their minds, women create with their bodies. And the male must imprint on the feminine in a nisexual way, where a spirit, a better spirit than you, has to imprint upon your material condition. And if that doesn't happen, you will be incredibly depressed, in the same way as a person will be depressed if they can't find a mate. And your duty is to find the best spirit and marry it, and serve it, and be nice to it, and treat it with respect and compassion. So, the spirit world is both very complex, but also very simple. Odin is both a messenger and lord of life. Odin uses different lowercase gods, or in the Christian tradition, angels, to provide certain roles. In Odin's case, responsibility for Darwinistic evolution, and being a messenger for God. If you read the Bible, you find it doesn't say other lowercase gods don't exist, but rather Yahweh is superior to them and the only one worth worshiping and revering, which we agree with due to his innate superiority. Yahweh is so superior that you should not fuck with him. I cannot repeat this. Do not mess with Yahweh. You should see Odin as a sort of angel, since in the Christian tradition, Odin is the same thing as Hermes Trismegistus, which is recognized across this academic field as completely obvious. And Hermes Trismegistus is integral to the Christian mystic tradition, since I'm pulling a lot of this stuff from authors like Thomas Aquinas in that time period. Again, the spirit world will make complete sense if you give me the time to explain it, but our society has the fucking attention span of 10 seconds. And I repeat, this is all consistent with Christianity, since I'm taking this stuff from medieval and early modern Christian mysticism, which all openly says this, which I have read dozens of books on, and I know almost none of you have, and I respect those who have, but let me explain this. That I made a deal with a god in a blue room. The terms of the deal, it would be my responsibility over the course of my life to figure out. And the rest of the video is me revealing to you the deal I cut in the blue room. I don't know all of it now, but I'll tell you what I do. Odin colloquially refers to me as kid all the time. He says that although he has massive respect for me as a mortal, he is so vastly superior to me that he cannot help but treat me with a certain degree of condescension, like an adult speaking to a child but vastly greater. He said, "Look, kid, you're the one who's going to have to do the work here, not me. Let me know what terms you need in order to carry this out. I don't really care as long as you get the job done in an efficient way. I am going to reward you tremendously, given what you are going to do and what you have already done is so difficult." I told him I refuse to be worshipped as a god. I just don't want to do that. He said, "Yes, very good. You just passed one of my tests. You see, my biggest goal is for the next stage of human evolution that you mortals have to pass through is to take some fucking responsibility for your own lives. The world religions, although they do carry tremendous value, have an innate issue in that they displace responsibility for life onto the prophet. This works for peasant farming societies, but once you level up to having godlike technology, you need to have another hit in another independent system. You see that in order to get this message across, people are not allowed to worship you. They have to empathize and understand your actions and what it took you to reach this point in order to replicate you and use their development both as individuals and spiritually and societies. If people worship you, both of you lose, since you lose your humanity, which is your defining trait, Rudyard, and they lose their ability to actually learn practically. I also, in the spirit world, also loses, because if they default their responsibility, they've failed the next test of human evolution. You see, I'm not like other girls. Mortals do that, but it's not really needed, all things considered. Rather, I need the mortals to take some fucking responsibility for their own actions as fucking adults. You needed to pass this test in order to get more knowledge. I leave tests for mortals to see if they're mature enough for the next stage of their development. You see, when I call this a religion, that's not really true. The emotional connotations with religion in your culture immediately lead towards Islam and Christianity, which are prophetic totalizing religions. This isn't that. Those religions already won the game so hard that competing with them is sheer insanity. What Yahweh, the Christian God, said, and he's translating this through Odin, so it sounds like him, I already gave you guys a 1,000-page book where I said that this was the last book and that the Abrahamic tradition was sealed with either Christ or Muhammad, depending what tradition you're part of. Now you want me to ask for more stuff? We need to have new things because the world keeps evolving. I did a great job with the Bible. I put a lot of work into that, and when I say I'm speaking through Yahweh's perspective here. I do not wish to insult Yahweh. That's a horrible idea. And he said, working with the Jews for thousands of years was really difficult, and I'm grateful I did it, but I don't have to drop this again. Be grateful for what you got. And Odin says he really likes the Christians, which is why he forced his people, the Nordics, to convert to Christianity to make them stronger. When I say Rudyard is founding a religion, I mean something along the lines of communism, Confucianism, or Taoism, which is a philosophy of moral conduct. You should perceive whatever Rudyard's doing as anti-communism. This religion is meant to be the inverse of communism, and so if you don't consider communism to be a religion, then this isn't a religion. Marx also makes claims about how the universe and God, in his case, progress, works. In Marxism, progress fits all the character of a religion in its relationship with God. From that, he makes predictions about the future and rules on how to live life and manage society. Rudyard is the anti-Marx. Marx was working for Satan, something Marx himself publicly wrote multiple times, which you can look up online, while Rudyard works for God. The universe naturally works by polarity, and that the global success of Marxism demanded the rise of its antithesis. Marx created Rudyard without even realizing it. One of Rudyard's friends, Dan McKinley, makes psychological assessments using AI and various scientific measurements. You can choose not to believe in its accuracy if you'd like. In Dan's system, Rudyard has the exact same psychological type as Karl Marx, Confucius, and the god Odin. The way Dan's system works is that there are nearly 400 different personality types, which makes an exact alignment like this nigh impossible in a purely probabilistic system. What that means is that you should perceive Rudyard as a philosopher or as a teacher, not a prophet per se. Rudyard is not perfect and is your responsibility to hold him accountable if he's wrong. Again, we mean that in the real way, not the BS lefty way. Let me say it this way. Knowing Karl Marx and knowing Rudyard to be his opposite is the best advertising Rudyard could ever have. Rudyard is successful, tall, celebrity from a Britannic background who supports heroism, is cultured, and loves God, while Marx was an envious, broke, atheist, racist Jew for his whole life. And of course, I like the Jews. They made the Abrahamic tradition. The secular Jews of the last few centuries created a lot of nihilistic ideologies. Communism was there to kill all religion, and we are here to enable all religions. Our goal is to save as many lives and help as many people as communism has hurt. Please help us in achieving our goal. We want China, Latin America, Russia, coastal America, and Europe, rather than experiencing collapse under the envy of materialist communism, to flourish to the highest levels possible through ideal heroism. We are gardeners. We are not here to tell you about God or how to worship him or how. We are here to help you realize your own individuality. This is a message that all religions can relate to, since Odin is the messenger god. So he's taking a hit for the team by showing the other religion that they can have organic communications with the spirit world in a happy, ethical, and fun way. We're not here to tell you what to believe, but to give you good advice. We're gardeners who want the world to grow into a stunningly beautiful forest. We love you, the animals, the trees, and the spirits more than we could ever say. There's no worshiping here. You will still be here to revere the Christian gods with your heart and souls. You will still be here to revere the Christian God with your heart and soul. Go to church, pray to Christ, and all that. Yahweh is also my Lord, so I do this too. However, I'm here to be your cool older brother to teach you useful advice. You can ignore the spirit world stuff if you'd like, and then take the common sense stuff. The spirit world is using this young man as a wake-up call to stage an intervention, since we're getting really worried about you. The simulation is talking to you. There is no irony here. This is completely sincere. The simulation is talking to you. This is real. Your society is the thing that's fake. Your society is the joke. 99% of human history thinks you are completely stupid, insane, and deranged, and they're getting really worried about you that you're killing yourself. You guys are the crazy 1% that believes all the stupid stuff. Everyone else in history disagrees with you. They think you're really nuts, and they're scared, and they love you, and they want to make sure you're fine. We'll get into this later. So you may see this message, if you're part of modern civilization, as schizophrenic or autistic. So you are projecting your schizophrenia and autism onto us. This is just the reasonable message for all of human history. Rudyard, the next stage of human evolution is called taking some fucking responsibility for your own actions. You mortals keep dodging it, but it's so central to the game, you can't ignore it. It's so hard to get mortals to take responsibility that we had to take a brilliant member of the aristocracy from the greatest empire in history, pick some deranged warrior ethnic minority with a deranged family, then beat and rape the kid over 40 times, have his entire society constantly insult him and berate him for his whole life, while lowering his reproductive odds to the worst level in human history, to get any mortal to take some fucking responsibility. We'll explain the logic through which this operates better. You see that it's very difficult to maintain the universe for God, and thus he gets very resentful when you don't take responsibility. He's also super resentful you don't never appreciate the nice things he does for you. For example, your society is so cognitively a woman that we literally sent you a charming, handsome, 6'4", cook, adventurer, celebrity young man to teach your society wisdom. And his audience is still 96% male, so you're still not grateful as a female society. We normally send some short old guy who wanders around. Rudyard is a gift from God in the same way you all are, in that reality is itself a gift from God. When you see how improbable Rudyard's life is, all of our lives are just as improbable in the cosmic scale of things. One of the biggest realizations Rudyard had is that since his dad's a banker, he was stacking up probabilistically the chances his life could ever happen, and then he realized that's not how the universe works. Scientists will talk about how improbable life itself is, in that the odds that the Earth has the right temperature for life, that we have the right distance from the sun, that we have the moon, which balances out our tides and other very important things, that life itself evolved and that life didn't die out, or even that we have air to breathe and water to drink. Past a certain point, the idea that it's all chance just seems completely ridiculous. At the same time, divine design, free will, and evolution are all true, since the universe is a single mind, or the anima mundi, which has certain parameters and goalposts through which evolution operates, in which the living people have to make choices in real time with archetypes that exist outside of time. The game is both in time and outside time at the exact same time. The more responsibility you take, the less work God has to do, and thus he rewards you exponentially, especially Darwinistically. The force evolution selects for is courage, creativity, cooperation, responsibility, and competitive ability. God thanks those who do these things, since they're intensely difficult, with sex, wealth, glory, and anything else. Look over history at the kinds of people the game rewards, whether the human species itself, the Romans, the Spanish, the Chinese, the dinosaurs, amongst others. They all fit into this underlying theme. Once you attain enough success, the Tree of Life will try its best to protect you, as we'll explain later. When you take responsibility, God and evolution rewards you. Women exist inside the shield men have established against the wild. Women have evolved to live in what's practically an artificial environment away from the jungle of Darwinistic competition, while never realizing it due to how expensive human offspring are to birth and raise. Your women bear an enormous cost for your species through its intelligence and culture, which is its greatest advantage. Your woman took the cost of how difficult your human condition is. Women counterbalance the male ability to achieve incredible things with having to bear the cost itself for human psyche. And the spirit world processes the human psyche and human consciousness as equivalent to the moon landing in your society's terminology. So please respect it. As your society became more safe, you didn't need men whose role was to fight against chaos, and thus women gained enormous social power. Your entire world became a domestic space, and thus you lost the distinction between friend and foe, which drove you crazy. You also lost the jungle, where you need the jungle to not drive yourself crazy, because men need difficult things to fight against. What Yahweh did was so unbearably kind through giving you Semitic prophets like Jesus. It was a way of short-circuiting your evolutionary logic, allowing people to be happy, to separate yourself from your biological urges. This was especially important in that particular era of history, as mankind was forming into large empires for the very first time, which were concentrated in the Middle East, and especially Israel, where the Jews were a proud people who kept fighting against those great empires. And they realized the only way they could win the game was by communing with God, which founded the Abrahamic tradition. However, they wanted removal from their environment. The big thing there was to separate themselves from their feeling of powerlessness to let their souls reach heaven, which is why Yahweh is Lord of your soul. And he is ultimate Lord, and Odin does not mess with Yahweh. Yahweh is a good guy, to say the least. However, to a god, you mortals all appear as the worst kind of woman. You appear silly, childish, irresponsible, and ungrateful. Thus it goes without saying that your god did an act of stunning kindness to you against a brutal, uncaring, Darwinistic universe, and you threw it away for not being generous enough. What the hell is wrong with you? Your god literally did the best thing in history, and it wasn't enough for you. This is why mortals don't get nice things. I provide a different service in this game through Rudyard. I am another name for Lord Hermes Trismegistus. Rudyard serves me, and he will be operating under my protection. Yahweh also owns him, but Yahweh also owns lots of people, and I spoke with Yahweh, and he's fine with letting me play with Rudyard right now. Hi, this is Rudyard. I'm going to take the narration back now. Thank you for your service, Odin. Odin likes these words for when someone offers you a service you respect, where he says a simple thank you or thank you for your service, and you should respond with, it's an honor to serve. The secret to life is innately empathy and listening to others. When you listen and treat others with respect and show consideration for the nice things they do, they will do more nice things for you. You should always thank others when they're kind to you. So thank you for your service, Odin, and it's an honor to serve. The spirit world operates outside of time, so as I've been having these visions over the last few months, I've basically downloaded 1,000 pages of lore from the spirit world. The good thing is I'm here for you for the rest of my life. That means the entire rest of our lives, hopefully until nearly the 22nd century if I don't die, is a attempt to explain and articulate what just happened here. This is a historic what the fuck just happened moment that the spirit world used to show you that it's still real. The spirit world was getting really annoyed and resentful that the world war and nuclear war subplot, as well as demonic, suicidal death cults that are totalitarianism, was not enough to get you to realize the world is innately magical and incredible. Your society has no way to process magic, because if you can understand it, it's scientific, and if you can't understand it, then it doesn't exist. So your worldview is divided into things you understand, and that's it, which is like you got a bunch of searchlights, but you can't actually see the stars. I'll explain that more. Part of the reason Odin reached out to me is that I love the act of leading so much. It's my favorite thing to do. I had always felt a profound sense of resentment about my life for what should be obvious reasons. However, after the first few visions at which it felt like my life had meaning, I started to realize I actually really like my life. The thing is, men don't shirk pain. They shirk meaningless pain. There's a huge amount of actual lived difference between the Crusaders walking 1,000 miles to the Holy Lands from England and a conscripted czarist peasant walking a quarter of the distance to fight for a regime they don't respect. The thing that's driving us insane isn't the suffering itself. People live way harder lives in the third world, but rather the meaningless ennui and loneliness. With the new meaning, I realized I had finally found the epic scale of my life I had earlier found horrifying to be incredible and awesome. I found the events I used to see with terror now found admiration in how I faced them. The situation was exactly the same, but my perspective had changed radically. I realized that the suffering I had faced in the past was only there to make my life more epic, since hardship is the wood that powers the fire of an excellent life. The horrible foes I had faced in my dying civilization suddenly seemed more like Mordor, the Empire of Star Wars, or the Lannisters. I saw our world as a fantasy world, which is what I had always wanted out of life. As a kid, I had wanted to live in an epic fantasy world, whether Lord of the Rings, a Norse saga, Greek mythology, or Dune. I realized then that my life was the most epic fantasy story ever. This is better than all of those. We have a demonic plague that's taken over our ruling class, the most powerful genies in history, or AI, advanced sorcery with technology, enormous land ships called tanks, and the most incredible factions, cultures, and cities. I had realized that I had finally achieved the life I could only fantasize about as a kid. As a kid, I wanted to live through all of that. I was once praying to Yahweh, and I asked him for a reason to live. I got home from walking. I started to write my autobiography. I've been writing my autobiography for the last few years, and I'm currently over 300 pages into it. I use it as a form of therapy, frankly. You saw my life. You'd know why I'd have to do this. One of the ways I channel God is that I write like I'm currently doing. God told me that when he saw my suffering as a child and he saw the nobility with which I fought my mother, he saw how I was mistreated by the system and how I prayed to him every single night. God said it broke his heart so much he made the deal with me. The deal was that in exchange for fighting back like this, he would give me an adult life I could only ever fantasize about, being a leader in a fantasy world. When I was on ayahuasca, and one of the things my mind whispered to me at least a dozen times since I was a child is that, Rudyard, you will get everything you could ever want in life, but not how you think or want. I now know what that means. I did get everything I could ever want as a kid, but the way it's conveyed to me is by giving me this incredibly heavy responsibility at such a young age. My life is both cosmically completely unfair and fair at the exact same time. Odin comes to you to thank you for being a badass in giving you advice. You don't worship him, he's an advisor and a messenger. The only thing I needed to live my best life was courage, or a reason to motivate myself, since I love my men so much, and I know that if I could lead both my men and my YouTube audience, I would be capable of unlocking whatever I wanted out of life. Odin intervened in the game, and he said, "Hey kid, if you write a list of every girl you masturbate to, I will solve every issue in your life." I feel like we've built up enough connection after 6 hours that I can share stuff like this with you, and I thought it was kind of weird when Odin said it, but he had healed my PTSD, so I'll do what he says. You don't understand. I did it, and I was looking at the list of girls I had wanked to. I had been feeling lethargic before I started writing the list, as PTSD has a nasty tendency to. This might be too much information, but we're past that stage. where every single girl on the list was white. And I'm only really attracted to white girls. I also find porn innately disgusting. Remember, I do have empathic abilities where I can look at the porn girl and then figure out her mental state and figure out what she's about. And they're all clearly addicted and really depressed. And I just find them really sad to watch. I don't know how you folks enjoy this or find this fun. Thus, I only look at old school artistic nudes, like the kinds you'd keep at a museum's art. I find the female form irresistible, and thus I keep nude art around my house alongside my collections of artisanal leather, antique maps, and Chinese watercolor. I try to only use images of women who seem happy and psychologically stable. I really like it when there's nature in the background. This actually stems because I have desire. I'm going to rationalize for why it's fine to you now. So in the Western tradition, if you look at early modern and ancient art, and even in medieval art in certain cases, the nude form has a special predominance. Sex isn't really scary. The consequences can be scary if you're stupid about it, but women find it so pathetic that men find their bodies scary. Our society's prudishness about this stuff is so lame. Seeing a pair of tits just won't kill you. You do have to be responsible for your own sexual desires, and that sex itself is pretty innately stupid. Sex is not to be glorified, but rather is itself symbolic for life, in that the strong, masculine, subduing Mother Nature, allowing there to be children and growth out of it, as men have done for all of history. Implicit in sex itself is the process of evolution working through. In the ancient Greek, Christian, mystic, and Hermetic traditions, the nude female form is symbolic for the potential of nature, in that a beautiful woman, if she gets the right sperm, can make the best baby, which is whatever you'd like, an incredible artist, an incredible conqueror, an incredible inventor. And this is why the Greeks and Renaissance artists emphasized the nude female form. The inverse is also true with the jacked male form, but I'm straight, so we're going to talk about girls now. I heard that the way to convey sex is that rather than imagining some disgusting OnlyFans girl prostituting herself out, when you think of sex, imagine this instead. A man getting back from war with his beautiful young wife. She's so happy to see him, and after they have a few glasses of wine, he goes at it, and afterwards they fall asleep together. Premarital sex is objectively not good, but sometimes we're not perfect. Adultery cannot be tolerated in any level, though, since men are so innately possessive of women. I studied the anthropology here. Adultery will kill a civilization. Once you have a husband, you have to stay with him. Odin said that sex is the force that powers life itself. When you look upon a forest of buzzing life, or the course of human history, imagine the forest you see, or the European Middle Ages, as being lots of people having happy, marital, orgasmic sex, and then taking care of their loving children who stem from it. The real reason masturbating is taboo in our society is women are trying to artificially inflate their sexual value, which is a far greater motivator of our society than you would believe. If men are scared of sex, they won't realize how innately boring sex is. So, as a person who has both watched porn and had sex, porn is innately disgusting, and sex is the most fun in the world, but when it's over, it's pretty boring. I mean, it's like the same thing. And you can't make sex your identity, but also don't be so squeamish. Literally nothing I said here is against the Bible. There is literally nothing against masturbating in the entire Bible. There is onanism, but that was pulling out in a very specific Old Testament clan context where Onan had certain responsibilities to impregnate someone. And we've thrown out so much stuff from the Old Testament, whether banning pork consumption or burning the Canaanites or stoning adulterers. Masturbating wasn't even really seen as bad until the early modern period, where it was really low on the medieval stack of sins. And its taboo status has more to do with the rise of reason making us scared of our animal instincts than anything itself in Christianity. Odin said that not letting young men masturbate is cruel due to how high their sex drive is. Odin said trying to block young men from masturbating is the equivalent of blocking young women from being deceitful. He said that this is a win for the boys, and he says, quote, "I can see your hypocrisy. I know you all do it, and you lie that you don't. You are liars and fakers." I was recording that last segment, so when I looked at my wank sheet, Odin said, "Yes, human biology is biology. You don't have to be scared." Odin said, "It's very clear you are very attracted to the women of your people. And you have zero plausible deniability in denying that at this point. I've seen this sheet." And he said, "Okay, kid, you were asking me for any reason to live, any reason to have energy. You feel lethargic. This sheet shows you very clearly care about something. So why don't you do it?" He said, "Rudyard, I know you don't get laid enough. I like your genetics. I would really like you to get laid more." And he said, "Okay, Rudyard, you're the hero of the fucking story. Why didn't you think you were? Your parents gave you such a pointlessly heroic name of Rudyard William Lynch. I know your backstory. We watched this video. You're a fucking hero, kid. Be a fucking hero. Be a hero for your people and save them. I've been trying to get the plot to get here. You finally got here. Thank you, Rudyard. So be a fucking hero. Your women would show some gratitude if you were a hero. So be a fucking hero." And he said, "Look, kid, so this sheet is a contract, and it shows that your body is controlled by life. Your soul is controlled by Yahweh, and your body is controlled by the life force. This is why you can't stop yourself from sexually fantasizing and masturbating, because your life is trying to propagate, which is its natural endpoint." Oh, the horror. You're thinking about making sure your species survives. You're thinking about making sure your people have children. You're such a terrible person for wanting to propagate your ancestral line and help all of your family and all of your ancestors. The spirits really like you having this much pleasure. We love watching you writhe in complete pleasure, and it makes us happy to know that you're happy. So, Rudyard, you already implicitly signed this contract with your own life force. And so this should go without saying, but you shouldn't masturbate or have sexual activity in front of others and those who don't want to see it. Also, it's very important you're not weird about sex. Every time your society tries to be sexual, they do it in a super cringe and lame way. Sex is the endpoint of a life of being a Chad, which is an end in itself. Odin is the god of masturbation in Norse mythology, with various theories that Shakespeare was an incarnation of Odin, and Shakespeare being a masturbation joke. Shakespeare was pretty crude and sexual in the context of his time. Hermes also taught humans how to masturbate in the Greek tradition. In the ancient Egyptian mythology, the Hermetic tradition attached to their version of Hermes, Thoth, involved the pharaoh masturbating in front of a crowd to show the force of life creating through semen. Odin said he gave us the ability to do this at any time for no cost, to show us that life still loves us. He said the fact we made it taboo as a society for no really good moral reason shows how silly mortals can be. So I'm going to unilaterally ban any sexual rituals and formism. I just refuse to have them. It looks really weird to outsiders, and I just don't want to do that. I don't want to share this side of myself with people besides those I've vetted for trust. It's why I'm relatively spare about these details in my life. If anyone tries to take this message and put it into weird sex stuff, I will immediately reject them. Once you venerate sex, it stops being fun. All I'm saying is that it's your duty to make sure your wife is happy every day. Odin said, "I'm calling your bluff, mortals. I can see inside your soul, and I can see that you don't get laid. This is a message so that your people fuck each other, which is what you need to survive. I care more about your people's survival than you do, apparently. The game would get really boring without you, and I'm kinda attached to your blood. You know, there's a reason Rudyard's attracted to white girls. I programmed him to be that way. Your entire people are dying since you don't fuck your women hard enough. Your women desperately want you, but they can't respect you since you don't do enough manly stuff. Your men are so weak that we see you as completely disgusting and lame. The rest of history views your society as unbearably pathetic. If you were real men, you could fuck your women so they're satisfied. Your women need to know this, but the dance of life won't allow them to tell you as part of their part. Women aren't responsible for men. You are. If you were actually men, none of this would be an issue. The meaning of life is to forcibly love others, to compete with others and use your own excellence to dominate and awe them, to see others with empathy and treat them as people as you dominate them. They won't say they like this, but your woman loves it when you take initiative. The guide to sex is to be good at it, and the way to be good at it is to be a Chad. To be clear, I, Rudyard, am not an enormous sex god or ladies' man or player. When you look at history, when empires did a good job of conquering their former colonies, they constantly simp after them and look for daddy's approval, whether the British in India or Rome and Gaul. When you dominate others, you should take into account the whole tree of life. Darwinism and war is innately brutal, but it's also the mechanism we use for advancement. Azar Gott and Ian Morris both have really good books about how almost every technological breakthrough in history came from war. Rudyard is an incredibly tough person, but he was in near constant pain for years because we wrote that into the plot. It's not his fault. If Rudyard can't handle the suffering of the world, we don't think you can either. Once you accept your powerlessness, you can truly be happy and live. That's the first step. The spirits think your entire society has its head up its ass 1,000 miles. Don't worry too much. Keep your cool. You're the smartest species your planet has produced so far that you know of. Isn't life fun? You know the game keeps changing, and the map keeps changing. Stay tuned and don't get too scared. The force that powers excellence is suffering. This is why so much greatness comes out of war. This is why the greatest empires in history were formed on fault lines with enemies who attacked them brutally for centuries. The left believes you can just choose to have a revolution and change to bring about utopia. That's not true at all. You and your society are organic organisms, and your story is who you are. You don't get to run away from your story. You are the things you do to others. If you do bad things to others, those actions reflect inside you over time. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. In Hermeticism, the transmutation of forms is that which allows excellence. Only through pronounced horror and suffering can you become a better person. The post-war golden age only came about due to the horror of the world wars. Rudyard suffered so much, but healed and went through all of this, so see where he is now. You are about to experience suffering as a species on a horrible level, but we need to tell you that we still love you, and at the end of this evolution is something more beautiful than you could ever possibly imagine. If you make it, things will be so good. Both you and the deer fell apart since you lost your predators. Enjoy being a fucking deer. You're always gonna be a deer. Even when you evolve into being a better deer, you'll still be a deer. Imagine you're a deer. Your life involves eating grass, playing around, and mounting the female deer. The deer is happy, and you aren't, since the deer knows what it is. You don't. Being a human is way cooler than almost any other species, so please be grateful your ancestors worked so hard to get here, that your species is so dope. You could have been a cockroach. You're a really cool animal that can talk to God, but you're still 100% an animal. Chimps have the same political and class structure as humans for a reason, because you're basically an overgrown chimp.